Video game preservation once again has unfortunately taken a turn for the worse when the U.S. Copyright Office decided to side with the bigger companies instead of the little guys and, the general population. October 18th was the day that the Copyright Office of the United States decided that it was not beneficial for people to check video games out like a library, when in fact that 90% of video games before 2010 are unavailable. You can't find them anywhere else. There's a very short cartridges for certain stuff. There's a limited amount of things. There was a lot of games that were never printed beyond like 10,000. There's a lot of things that this goes against, but there is an article here that was done by Gizmodo that I want to talk about, dive into, and show stuff because it touches on stuff like the Video Game History Foundation, the Video Game Library, and a bunch of other things that this DMCA ruling goes against, and it restricts a lot of things, and it can hurt the preservation efforts of video games, but it can also carry into other things, and I'll touch on that in the end. Federal government says you don't have a right to check out retro video games like a library book. The U.S. Copyright Office denied an exemption from the DMCA to allow gaming historians to access out-of-print games they can't legally get anywhere else. This was updated on the 25th, by the way, and it's the 27th at the time of this recording. And I think it's going to be up by like beginning of November, so high in the future. Most of the world's video games are from close to 50 years of history are effectively legally dead now. A Video Game History Foundation study found you can't buy nearly 90% of the video games before the 2010. And keep in mind, that's only for like America and stuff like that. That's not including games that are out in other countries and all across the world. This is, I believe this was strictly just the United States. Preservationists have been looking for ways to allow people to legally access gaming history, but the U.S. Copyright Office dealt with a heavy blow Friday. Feds declared that you or any researcher have no right to access old games under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA. Groups like the Video Game History Foundation and the Software Preservation Network have been putting their weight behind an exemption to the DMCA surrounding video game access. The law says that you can't remotely access old defunct games that are still under copyright without a license, even though they are not available for purchase. The current rules in the DMCA restrict libraries and repositories of old games to one person at a time in person. This is a huge blow, because if you think about it, this also, they could push this and have it at video game like conventions and stuff like that. They could just blow this out of the water, blow it out of proportion, and really push this if they want to. It would make it unavailable for people to use like even demos at like video game or retro video game conventions or shows, mobile shows, going off and showing people things. Hell, you couldn't even run a video game business where you have like a party bus or something like that. They could even get that on you. Like, this is a huge blow to the foundation that I really like and enjoy, the Video Game History Foundation, as well as other preservation efforts to deal with this stuff. And like I said, I'll go into a little bit later. The foundation's proposed exemption that will allow more than one person at a time to access the content stored in museums, archives, and libraries. This would allow players to access a piece of video game history like they would if they checked out an ebook from the library. The Video Game History Foundation and Software Preservation Network argue that if a museum has several copies of a game in its possession, then it should be able to allow people to access the game as they are copies available. In the Copyright Office decision dated October 18th, which was found on page 30, dictator Shira Perlmutter, I don't know who this crazy old person is, agreed with multiple industry groups, including Entertainment Software Association. She recommended the Library of Congress keep the same restrictions. Wait, they're affecting the Library of Congress too? Section 1201 of the DMCA restricts unauthorized access to copyright works, including video games. However, it allows the Library of Congress to allow some classes of people to circumvent those circumstances, or those restrictions, which they definitely should fall under, and same with a bunch of other people. In a statement, the Video Game History Foundation said lobbying efforts from right shareholders continue to pull back progress. It's a bunch of old men, by the way. These are a bunch of old crooked men that do not care about history. They care about the dollar bill, and they do not care about consumer rights or anything about history. They just care about the dollars. The group pointed to the comments from a representative of an ESEA. An attorney of the ESA told Ars Technica, "I don't think there is at the moment any combinations and limitations that the ESA members would support to provide remote access." It doesn't matter. You're giving it to a certain amount of people. It's not like people can go and sell these. These are just limited access to people to experience older video games and to inspire the younger generations and inspire people. But they don't want that. They want everyone to conform. It's stupid. It's stupid. I have a lot of opinions. Video game history preservationists said these games repositories could provide full screen pop-ups of copyright notices to anyone who checked out a game. They would also restrict access to a time limit or force the user to access via technological controls like a purpose-built distribution of streaming platforms. They want to do it like ebooks. Industry groups argued that the museum didn't have the appropriate safeguards to prevent users from distributing games once they had them in hand. They also argued that there's a substantial market for older or classic games, and a new free library would access games would jeopardize this market. Sounds like GameStop got in there and got involved as well, because they recently got into the retro market, and it would affect them greatly because they put a lot of effort and a lot of money into that. Agreed with the industry groups. Of course, the people that are paid off would agree with the industry groups. While the Register appreciates that proponents have suggested broad safeguards that could deter recreational use of video games in some cases, she believes that the requirements are not specific enough to conclude that they would prevent market's harm. The market was built on resellers and a bunch of other stuff. Like I said, I feel like this is because GameStop has gotten into the market itself. Now that it's affecting shareholders and a bunch of other people, now it's a problem to them. I really think that's like a reason behind it. It makes too much sense with everything lining up. It just makes too much sense now. Do libraries that lend books hurt the literacy industry? In many cases, publishers see libraries as free advertising for their product. It creates word of mouth, and since libraries only have a limited number of copies, those who want a book to read for longer incentivized to purchase one. The video game industry is also effectively shooting itself in the foot that it does not even recognize when the third-party preservations are actively about to help them for no cost on the publisher's part. It's because they don't care, they want the money. If there is such a substantial market for classic games, why are still so many unavailable for purchases? Players will inevitably turn to piracy or emulation if there's no easy access to playing these older games. The game industry absolutely forces researchers to explore extra legal methods to access the vast majority of out-of-print games that are otherwise available, wrote the Video Game History Foundation. This has a substantial impact on the preservation efforts of video games, but also in a pop culture sense. I'm slowly collecting anime and manga magazines. That companies don't exist anymore. They're out of print. They got bought up by other people. They are clearly out of date, and no one has these anymore. There are ads in here. There's information of time period stuff that people don't have access to and don't know about or could read about. And that clearly affects that, because there's also a video game library that copies and photo digitalizes all these books and all these materials to share with people, to show what it's about. And that's what I would love to do with that, but that clearly affects that. And that can affect a bunch of other things. And like I said before, this could affect and push onto smaller businesses if they have like a video game trailer they want to take out to parties and go and do like rent out video games. Could affect video game conventions and tournaments, like the Smash Brothers tournaments they were dealing with Nintendo. Could be with that, because you're accessing that game to more than one person at a time. And just because you own it doesn't mean you own it and you can lend it out to people. That's what it's implying. So what's the point of buying a game if you can't even let other people borrow it or play it to show it off? And I'm totally in agreement with the article. It's free advertisement, so why even bother stopping it? It's 90% of the consumer economy will not even want to buy that game. It's for strictly certain markets. Like for me, I'm collecting Nintendo Wii games. Like, who out there wants to do that? You go to random Joe Schmo down the street, he doesn't want to do it. I'm a collector who has a tie to the system, which is why I want it. And if the people have ties to the system, they'll get that nostalgia feeling back, and then they'll go buy it. I don't see, they're just shooting themselves in the foot, and they're shooting the preservation efforts in the foot as well. This is a major pushback that a lot of people are not talking about, and it's ridiculous that, of course, the judge is going to side with the people who pay him off. And that's how it is with a lot of people when it comes to these cases. A lot of those judges have received nice little gifts and incentives to favor them. That's what a lot of lobbyists do. They just pass on paychecks. They pass on fancy gifts or free trips. It happens all the time in Congress and a bunch of other places, which is why lobbyists and lobbying does amazing things if you're rich. If you're not, we have to suffer, unfortunately. I feel like if we had a very big backer, and if like congressmen and women could like fight for it, that would be great. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I'm not going to talk about social circumstances or anything right now in the United States, but right now that is not an issue. That is not in the top priority. And I really feel like once everything settles, this should be pushed. We as a people, us as a gaming society, us as a history preservationist society, people like me who want to save this history and pass it on to younger generations, need to bring this up to light. This is something that is very important that's going to be thrown to the wind. 90% of video games are unavailable from 2010 and before. You can't access them easily, or you can't find them, or they were just thrown away. It was like E.T. They were just taking up a room and they throw them away. Hold on, I have a good example for this. A good example of this is Ninja Breadman. You probably have never heard of this game before. This is literally a carbon copy of 3 other games. They are the exact same games with different skins on them. I'll bet a lot of these copies were thrown out or given to Big Lots or to Ollie's and sat there and eventually got thrown in the dumpster because they weren't selling. And when things don't sell, people try to get rid of it to try and recuperate what losses they have. But this is a good example of what not to do as a game developer, what not to do as a game creator, because just make a bunch of carbon copy games that are very unplayable and pretty much unbeatable and just make trash. This helps prevent it. Preservation of this helps prevent it from coming back. There's a famous saying that I love to repeat over and over again because it's very true. If you don't learn from history, it's doomed to repeat itself. And this is a very good example because shovelware was very rampant during the Wii, but it's not as bad as it is, as it was. It's calmed down a lot. A lot of people learn from this not to do it because you put a lot of money into it and it comes out to be crap. And that's what it really affects. It affects a lot of that. It affects the future of kids, whether you realize it or not. It affects it. Yeah, we'll be in VR full dive eventually, which will be fantastic. But you got to remember the building blocks and the basics of where you started. And that's why I want to preserve this stuff, because the people before me that were into anime and manga, they were reading this. Then I read them when I was younger, but my kids won't know about it. They'll only know about it because I'll have it on hand and have it stored and stably kept away, which is why I greatly support the Video Game History Foundation, the software preservation effort, and I support the video game library itself. So let me know what you guys think. I really wanted to bring this to light, talk about this. This is something a little bit heavier, but very important to talk about and bring up to you guys. So let me know what your opinions are and what you thoughts are on this. Your thoughts on the DMCA rule being pushed in favor of big companies and not consumers. Just let me know. Love you all. Appreciate you. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.